Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu News Analysis. Before we begin, let me wish all the aspirants who are appearing for this year's prelims on Sunday all the very best. And don't forget, as soon as your exam ends on the 28th of May, on the very same day we shall go live on our YouTube channel at 7 p.m. to discuss the question paper, to analyze the trend, provide you the answer keys, and also predict the estimated cutoff. So don't forget to attend the session live. And we also have a price drop campaign going on until the 30th of May. It's a special one-time opportunity for you to get a massive 60% discount on all our IAS courses. If you guys are interested, just head to the pinned comment in this video and you'll find the link where you can register for yourself for this scholarship. So with this, let's begin with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by first looking at the topics that we are going to cover today. I have chosen three important columns from page 8 and 10 that covers Indian polity and economy. All the three articles are very, very important. It requires a detailed analysis. Followed by this, we shall take a look at 5 small articles that are more relevant for your prelims. So just stay with me for the next 1 hour 10 minutes. I promise to cover all these topics comprehensively in as much detail as possible so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. The whole idea is to ensure that you prepare thoroughly for prelims and as well as for mains. If you're benefiting from these videos, just support us by pressing the like button. Share these videos with other aspirants. Let us know in the comments if you're liking them, and also subscribe to the channel. So let's get started with the first article from page number 8. This article examines the constitutionality of a recent ordinance that was brought out by the President following the recommendation of the Union Cabinet. You might have read in newspapers that on the 19th of May, the President of India exercised his law-making powers or his ordinance-making powers under Article 123 of the Indian Constitution, which essentially has carried out a change to a recent judgment that was delivered by a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court on a matter related to the administration of Delhi. I'm sure most of you know that since many years, there has been a constant power tussle going on between the Delhi government and the Lieutenant Governor's office, which is backed by the Union government, that is primarily the Ministry of Home Affairs. With regard to administrative control over certain matters related to the administration of Delhi, which is a union territory, there has been a constant power struggle, a power tussle between the elected government of Delhi and the Legislative Assembly on one side, and the office of the Lieutenant Governor, who acts on behalf of the Union government, that is primarily the MHA. So the issue at hand here was the matter of services with regard to the bureaucracy of the Delhi administration, their appointment, their transfers. In this matter, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court had recently ruled on the 11th of May that the government of NCT, that is National Capital Territory of Delhi, has complete exclusive powers to determine the appointment and transfer of the officers who come under the control of the Delhi administration. Essentially, the Supreme Court had recognized the jurisdiction that the Delhi government has over the services related to the NCT territory. But within a week, the Union government has overturned this constitutional judgment by bringing out an ordinance which has invoked the powers of the President to pass ordinances under Article 123. So first, before we begin, let's understand what exactly is Article 123, especially from a prelims point of view. Once we understand Article 123, then we shall thoroughly examine the constitutionality of this ordinance which has come under question. See, Article 123 is indeed a special provision in the Indian Constitution. It's one of the most extraordinary provisions in the constitution of a democratic country, because most of the other democracies don't have such extraordinary powers. It provides a special power to the president Essentially, it is a law-making power. The President of India has been vested with legislative powers. But of course, this is not a discretionary power of the President. Here the President is bound by the aid and advice of the Union Cabinet. As per Article 74, the President of India is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So it's not a discretionary power, but based on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, the President can promulgate these ordinances, which is essentially a law passed by the President or promulgated by the President, which essentially gives legislative powers or law-making powers to the President, that is to the executive. Now this is quite rare and unique because see, in a constitutional democracy, one of the core principles is the doctrine of separation of powers, where the powers are clearly demarked between the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. But here in India, you find a rare instance where the executive is given law-making powers. It is stepping into the domain of the legislature and passing laws or bringing out laws in the name of an ordinance which is promulgated by the President. So, passing these ordinances, they can't be done at any point of time. It's an extraordinary provision which has been given to the Government of India, the executive, and it has to be exercised only under certain circumstances which has been clearly spelled out in the Constitution. The law clearly says, the constitutional provision says, that only when the Parliament is not in session, that is both the houses or either one of the houses, if they are in session, this provision cannot be invoked by the government. Ordinances cannot be promulgated by the President even if one house is in session. Let's say Lok Sabha is in session or Rajya Sabha is in session or both houses are in session. So when the legislature is active in session, ordinance cannot be promulgated by the President. It will be void. It will be unconstitutional. This provision is to address an extraordinary situation that might arise only when the Parliament is in recess. Only when the Parliament is not in session, right? That is when, or one of the houses is not in session. That is when these powers can be invoked. Is that clear? So once an ordinance is promulgated, it will have the same effect as that of a law which is enacted by the Parliament of India. But however, once the Parliament meets again, such an ordinance has to be approved by the Parliament. Otherwise, it will lapse within 6 weeks after the reassembly of the Parliament. Understood? Within 6 weeks of reassembly of the Parliament, it has to be approved. It has to be vetted by the Parliament, by both the houses, or else it is going to expire. Or else even before that, if the Parliament rejects the ordinance, brings out a resolution disapproving the ordinance, even then the ordinance will become void. But during its period of operation, whatever measures are taken, whatever acts are done under this ordinance, which has the effect of law, they will continue to remain valid. And the government through the President can withdraw the ordinance as well in between. But the provisions here clearly show that the whole purpose of providing this extraordinary power is to deal with an extraordinary situation that might arise where a sudden intervention is needed to bring out a law on a certain policy matter. So if, let's say, Parliament is in recess, Parliament is not available to pass that law, only in those extraordinary situations can the executive invoke these powers through the President. Once the legislature is back, once the Parliament reassembles, it either has to be approved within the expiry period, or the President himself can withdraw this, or the Parliament can even reject this and throw this out. So that is the extraordinary power of the ordinance. So one important fact here for your prelims: what is the maximum period that an ordinance can remain in force? That can be a question. The answer would be 6 months and 6 weeks. Why? Because we have a constitutional provision which states that the Parliament has to meet within a maximum period of 6 months, meaning in a given year, there have to be 2 Parliament sessions. The maximum duration between 2 sessions allowed by the Constitution is 6 months. So with a maximum period of 6 months, Parliament is going to reconvene, and from there you have another 6 weeks time for the ordinance to expire. So the maximum period an ordinance can remain in force is 6 months, 6 weeks. Of course, this could even be converted into a law if the government tables a bill after the reassembly of the parliament and gets it enacted, right? This could even become a law and it would replace the previous ordinance. So kindly make a note of these important factual points that have been provided over here. It's very, very important for your prelims. Under what circumstances can ordinance be promulgated? It can be retrospective in nature. It can address retrospective issues, previous issues as well. The moment it is rolled out, it has the effect of a law, and if the houses are in session and if ordinance is brought out, it is void in nature. So the president cannot promulgate ordinances whenever the president wants, whenever the government wants. It is only when the parliament is not in action, only when the parliament is in recess. All right. So please go through these factual points that I have discussed. They have been added in a point-wise format, and make a note. They are very, very important for your prelims. Now, coming back to this ordinance related to the NCT, the National Capital Territory of Delhi. This ordinance that the president has promulgated just last week, it raises two important legal and constitutional questions. The first question is the very scope of the judgment of the Supreme Court delivered on the 11th of May, in which the Supreme Court had recognized that on the matter of services, that is the bureaucracy of the Delhi government had complete authority according to the Supreme Court. That is what the Supreme Court clearly established. But now, the Union government, through the President, has brought out this ordinance which overturns the Supreme Court judgment and essentially gives powers to the Union government to decide upon appointments and transfers in the Delhi government through the office of the Lieutenant Governor. Right? This is what has happened. So the scope of the judgment of the Supreme Court is under question here, and the very constitutionality of this ordinance. Is this ordinance constitutionally valid? Does it violate any constitutional provision? That is what the writer here is examining. So first we should begin the discussion by understanding Article 239AA of the Indian Constitution that provides for a special administrative setup in the NCT Delhi region, in the National Capital Territory of Delhi. So let's take a look at Article 239AA. This constitutional provision was added into the Constitution through the 69th Amendment that was enacted in 1991 based on the recommendations of the S. Balakrishnan Committee. Please make a note of this point, very, very important. This committee had been set up in 1987 because there had been a long-standing demand to grant statehood to the Union Territory of Delhi. The committee recommended that statehood is not viable to Delhi as it's the national capital, because the national capital of the Union has a very unique status. It is the seat of the central government, all the central institutions, right? All the critical arms of the government, the judiciary, they're all located at the national capital. Even all foreign embassies are present here, and the Union government has a responsibility to protect them, right? So national security, police, law and order, right? Even land-related issues become critical in the national capital. So in few specific areas, the Union deserves to have control over the national capital. But as far as day-to-day administration is concerned, delivery of services and regular administration of the region is concerned, this is where the Union shouldn't be having any control, and there should be a federal government in place. So such a unique model was recommended here by the S. Balakrishnan Committee, which led to the introduction of Article 239AA through the 69th Amendment Act. Now, through this article, 3 subjects on the state list, they have been kept reserved for the center. 3 specific subjects, that is land, police, and public order, that is law and order. These 3 entries on the state list, that is under the 7th schedule of the Constitution, they have been kept reserved for the center, considering the fact that Delhi is the national capital territory, so that the center can exercise powers on these state subjects as well and protect the interests of the Union government. But in all the other matters where the state has exclusive jurisdiction, The Delhi government, even though it's a union territory, the Delhi government and the Legislative Assembly exercise complete powers according to Article 239 AA. That is exactly what the article says. Because every other subject on the state list and concurrent list as well, in all these subjects, the government of NCT and the Legislative Assembly will have complete powers, will have complete authority over it. Only in the subject of police, land and public order, which is usually a state subject, only these three subjects have been reserved for the center, given the fact that Delhi is a national capital territory. So this is what the Constitution says. But since the last 30 years, this point has always been a point of contention. The center has always tried to enhance its control over the administration of Delhi through the office of the Lieutenant Governor, and this has often led to a standoff, a constitutional standoff between the Delhi government and the office of the Lieutenant Governor. Now, if you look at the particular issue which has been in news, that is the matter of control over services, who controls the bureaucracy of the Delhi government? Who will appoint the officers? Who will transfer them? Right? Who has the authority? In this regard, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court headed by Chief Justice Chandrachud clearly ruled on the 11th of May that the Delhi government has exclusive powers. The constitution is very clear on this. But now the union government has overturned this through an ordinance and given itself the powers to make these appointments and transfers. So let's see what exactly the constitution says and what the ordinance has exactly done. Based on that, we can evaluate and determine whether this is constitutional or not. And if the ordinance is challenged for a judicial review, we can understand what is going to happen. What would be the outcome? If you look at Article 239 AA, Clause 3, Subclause A, this provision says that subject to provisions of the Constitution, the Legislative Assembly shall have powers to make laws for the whole or any part of National Capital Territory with respect to any matters enumerated in the state list or in the concurrent list, except matters related to entry 1, 2 and 18 of the state list. This is what has been specifically excluded under this provision, which is nothing but public order, police and land. So the government of NCT Delhi, the Union Territory Government and the Legislative Assembly, does not have jurisdiction only over these state subjects. Otherwise, in every other matter listed on the state list and concurrent list comes under the government of NCT Delhi. This is made very, very clear by the Constitution. Now, what the ordinance has done is that the latest ordinance brought out by the union government, what this ordinance has done is that it has added entry 41 into Article 239 AA, Clause 3, Subclause A. Article 41 deals with the matter of services. This matter was clearly under the state list, and NCT Delhi, the Delhi government, had complete authority and jurisdiction over it. But now this entry on the state list has been kept reserved for the union government through this ordinance. So this exception is being made. Essentially, Clause 3, Subclause A has been amended by the ordinance. The ordinance has amended Article 239 AA, Clause 3, Subclause A, and has added entry 41 here as an exception. Now the point is this constitutional? Does the union government have the power to amend Article 239 AA, Clause 3, Subclause A through an ordinance? That is the question here. Now, if you look at Article 239 AA, Clause 7, Subclause A, it has made it very, very clear that if any changes have to be made, right, which is not in line with the provisions and the spirit of this article, it has to come through a constitutional amendment done under Article 368. See, yes, the Parliament has been empowered to make laws on behalf of Delhi, on behalf of NCT government Delhi, but this is only on the matters where the subjects have been reserved for the centre, that is land, police and public order. And any other law passed by the Parliament which supplements these provisions of Article 239 AA, it is valid only if it is consequential and incidental and as per the provisions of Article 239 AA. So only laws made by Parliament dealing with matters of land, police, public order of Delhi, only they remain valid. If any other change has to be done to this constitutional provision, right, Parliament has to do it through Article 368. A constitutional amendment under Article 368 has to be done. This again makes it very clear that an ordinance promulgated under Article 123 does not have the power, the mandate to amend Article 239AA. So now the ordinance which has added entry 41 into this exception list, reserving this matter of services to the center, to the Lieutenant Governor, automatically becomes constitutionally invalid, right? Because the government should have done it through a constitutional amendment under Article 368. Then it would have had validity. But doing this under Article 123 through an ordinance is clearly unconstitutional according to the writer, and hence he is very convinced that if this is challenged in front of the court, of course the judiciary has judicial review, the power to carry out judicial review over any ordinance. And if judicial review is taken up, it will be struck down, it will be declared as unconstitutional according to the writer. See, when it comes to ordinances, there are various judgments which have made it very, very clear that it is subjected to judicial review. For example, look at the landmark Krishna Kumar Singh versus State of Bihar case 2017. In this, the Supreme Court had clearly held that Article 123, which gives the ordinance making powers to the President, it is not immune from judicial scrutiny. Right? The judiciary has powers to review any ordinance to check the legislative authority, whether the provisions of Article 123 have been truly followed. Because if you go back to Article 123, what we discussed, you can clearly see there that if the ordinance is brought with any malified intention, with any wrong intention to subvert the legislature, then clearly it is void. Such an ordinance is void. And the Supreme Court, obviously, when it takes it up for review, will strike down any such provisions and declare it as unconstitutional. So under Article 239AA, it has been made very clear under Clause 7, Subclause A, that any amendment should come through Article 368 done by the Parliament. So any changes done to this article under ordinance making powers of Article 123 will remain invalid. This is very, very clear and very evident. So this in itself is one ground to declare the ordinance as unconstitutional. Next, even if you look at what the Supreme Court has said about Article 239AA and the status and powers of the Delhi government, it is very clear that even though Delhi is a union territory, it has a special provision here where the federal structure has to be maintained. Right? The structure is quite similar to what has been provided for Jammu and Kashmir as well, the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. It is supposed to have a legislative assembly, an elected government, while remaining a union territory. Right? The center will have a lieutenant governor, an administrator to look after certain aspects which is kept reserved for the center. There have been two constitutional benches of the Supreme Court which has looked into this matter, the division of powers between the government, the elected government and the union government. Right? In 2018, the Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court had clearly said that the status of a state may not be accorded to Delhi. Delhi is a union territory without doubt. But however, the spirit and concept of federalism will still apply to it because you have an elected government. You have an elected assembly. If you don't follow the spirit of federalism, if you don't respect the principles of federalism, then what is the purpose of having an elected legislature for the union territory? Right? So the Supreme Court was very clear in 2018 when the Constitution Bench looked at the issue that the spirit and principles of federalism has to be respected. Delhi is a union territory, it's not a state. But still the federalist principles have to be respected and followed by the union government. The basic aspects of center-state relations has to be followed as the special provisions have been given to the elected legislature and the government. However, on three specific subjects which have been kept reserved under the state list, that is police, land and public order, they will remain under the lieutenant governor and basically under the Ministry of Home Affairs. This is a valid distribution of powers. But any other attempt to change this, the two through an ordinance, is clearly unconstitutional. The Legislative Assembly of Delhi also has the power to make laws over all the other subjects figuring in state and concurrent list except for these excluded subjects. This is what the Supreme Court observed in 2018. Is that clear? it clearly highlighted that the elected government and the legislature, they have complete powers on all other state subjects and even on all matters of concurrent list. The center has exclusive powers only in matters of police, land and public order. So please be very clear about this. Even in the latest judgment that was delivered on 11th May 2023, this was the second constitution bench to look into this question. This constitution bench was headed by Chief Justice Chandrachud, and it has observed that Article 239 AA represents a clear mandate of the Constitution to provide institutional governance that is founded on the spirit of participatory, representative and responsive government. This clearly highlights the importance of the elected government. Right? The elected government of Delhi is supposed to be participatory. It is supposed to be a responsive government, supposed to be a representative government, representing the interests of the people, the electorate of Delhi. So to look after administrative matters and issues like water, electricity, education, healthcare, etc., it is the Delhi government which has the authority. And if the government has not given a control over the services regarding appointment and transfer of officials, then how do you expect the elected government to look after the governance of Delhi? Right? This is a clear argument made by the Supreme Court as well, and it has said that the Constitution has created a federal model, and this applies for NCTD as well. It applies for the NCT government of Delhi. Is that clear? So there have been two judgments of the Supreme Court supporting this basis, the basis of federalism, the principle of federalism applying for the Union Territory of Delhi as well. So this is the second ground on which the ordinance can be struck down by the Supreme Court if it is challenged for a judicial review. Understood? So please be very clear about these points that the writer is making. It helps you understand Article 123, 239 AA and the political tussle, the power tussle between the elected Delhi government and the union government. Now, we move on to another important column on page number 8, written by Arun Maria, one of the former members of the erstwhile Planning Commission, in which he talks about the trickle-down economic model. He carries out an evaluation of the trickle-down theory and he provides his opinion. I'm stressing on this because this is the opinion of Arun Maria. It might seem one-sided to you, that's why I'm giving you this disclosure. Right? He's taking a stand against the trickle-down model of economic development. All right? I will explain what is the trickle-down theory. We'll discuss that. We'll look at the criticism of it as well. And we'll look at the points being made by the writer. Right? According to the writer, the first point he's trying to make here is that divide, income divide, social divide in India and around the world is increasing drastically over the years. He makes substantive arguments to support this theory. He says that in India, there has been increasing economic and social divide, which is very evident. The rich are getting richer, whereas the poor are being driven to abject poverty, which is widening the divide between the rich and the poor. This is the primary argument the writer is making. This is the essential premise of the writer. That socio-economic divide in our country is increasing. Day by day, rich are becoming richer. The middle and lower classes are being pushed towards poverty. So these divisions, these economic social divisions, they are a feature of not just the Indian economy, they are seen around the world according to the writer. The division between the economic haves and the have-nots, essentially the division between the rich and the poor. This is seen around the world and it has been exacerbated because of all the conflicts and divides which are affecting the world. He talks about ongoing wars and conflicts, including Russia-Ukraine war. He talks about the developed industrialized countries, the G7 countries as well, and how even in developed nations there is a huge income divide, a huge social divide, where almost 99% of the wealth in almost every country is concentrated in the hands of 1% of the elite. He is referring to democratic countries, not even autocratic countries. He gives examples of democratic nations like India, US, etc., where almost 99% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of just 1% of the rich elite. Rest of the wealth is distributed between the middle and lower classes. So this is the division he's highlighting, the widespread socio-economic division, which is just increasing day by day. Because see, around the world, the capitalist policies being followed by most democratic governments and even by some autocratic governments, it tends to favor the rich, the industry, the private sector, etc. Now, this is where the writer says there is a core problem. All right? The writer says that the theory of privatization started gaining more traction since 1980s. The concept of free market liberalism, right, and free market capitalism was championed by few Western leaders such as Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom and Ronald Reagan of the United States. These were seen as primary votaries of free market capitalism, where it was believed that the government should do little. It should withdraw from various sectors where it shouldn't be playing a role and allow the private sector to play a bigger role. It is based on the concept of the government is the root of the problem, right? Since 1980s, you have seen this shift happening in economic models and as well as in public administration, where the government, instead of strengthening its role and presence in certain areas, it has withdrawn itself and allowed private sector to play a bigger role. Of course, there is a counter theory to this. The counter theory is that the government is inefficient. There is red tapeism in the government. If government is involved in every area of business, then the government is bound to fail. For example, if governments are running airlines, running restaurants and hotels and resorts, right, manufacturing watches, then governments are bound to be inefficient because of bureaucracy, the political interference, and the red tapeism which is prevalent in the government. Government is not supposed to do all these tasks. It's the task of the private industry. That is what the counter argument says. Right? The government should just be an enabler. The government should retreat from unnecessary domains and areas and allow the free markets to take over, allow the private sector, the private enterprise to take over so they can provide all the essential services. Whereas government will only come out with policies, enabling policies, regulations, and enable the private sector to deliver. This is seen as a more efficient model of public administration and economic model of development. It's widely believed that in trickle-down theory, if you provide concessions to the top, if you provide tax benefits, rebates and subsidies to the rich industries, the private sector and the elite, they will make investments. They will take up enterprise, private enterprise. They will venture into all the areas and deliver essential services, which eventually is supposed to provide welfare to the lower classes as well. Basically, it's like a funnel. According to trickle-down theory, which is a core concept in capitalism, it is believed that if the government provides all benefits to the top, to the rich elite sections, by giving tax holidays and rebates, etc., the industry will be encouraged to make more investments, and this will eventually trickle down by creating jobs, by providing essential services, and eventually providing welfare over a period of time. All right? So that is why it's called the trickle-down model. Basically, whatever the government pours at the top will slowly trickle down and reach the lower sections of the society as well. But this is criticized by the critics on the other side. They say that when the government is not playing a role in social security, if it is not looking after welfare and not providing essential services and allowing capitalist and market forces to take over, it is bound to increase the divide between the rich and the poor. In 1980s, we witnessed a trend around the world, not just in democracies, even in autocratic countries, that if government was involved in all sectors, it was seen as anti-reform, it was seen as socialist, it was seen as a socialist policy, it was seen as outdated. All right? The same trend came up in India as well, because the socialist model in India had created redundancies and corruption and the license Raj era, where the government was slow in decision making, involved in every sector, and it had slowed down the Indian economy to an extent where we faced an economic crisis, right? But any government at that point in 1980s following a pro-government approach, playing a bigger role in all sectors and restricting the role of the markets, was seen as anti-reform and socialist, and hence government's role in providing social safety net or in providing social welfare was brought down. This picked up pace from 1990s and it has been guiding the liberalized, globalized world order. Right, in the last 30-40 years, we have seen a transition towards a liberalized, globalized economy. and it has influenced political systems and social systems as well. But the writer is against this. He says this is a flawed model. Be it a democratic state, be it an autocratic state, if you're allowing private sectors to play a bigger role and government is minimizing its role in social welfare, then that is a recipe for disaster according to Arun Maria. He says governance of all countries, they should focus on benefiting the common man, common citizens. That is what good governance should be all about. Good governance is not about helping investors, helping companies, giving benefits to the industry. The primary role of any government, according to Arun Maria, is to provide for the welfare of the lowest sections of the society. Provide the basic necessities first. This is the argument he is making. So the writer is essentially of the viewpoint that free market capitalism, which took over the world during the Cold War, it gained even more popularity post 91 after the collapse of communism and socialism. As Soviet Union collapsed, right? Democratic countries led by the West, led by the US, further propagated market principles, free market principles, and capitalist model of growth, that is essentially the trickle-down model of growth. The writer says that it was widely believed under this model that subsidies are always bad. If government is giving subsidies to the poor, let's say government is giving out free food to those who are suffering from hunger and malnutrition. Let's say government is giving out subsidies for fertilizers or fuel, right? If it is subsidizing agriculture, subsidizing the small industries, the micro industries, this was seen as poor policy. Whereas providing incentives to the market, to the rich, to the investors and industry, the large industries, was seen as a good initiative. This mindset started prevailing since the era of LPG reforms. As privatization, liberalization, globalization took over, right? This model became very popular, that subsidies are in general bad. It is anti-reform, it is conservative. It is a drain on the wealth of the country. Whereas giving incentives to the industry and the rich is good. It is favorable because the benefits will trickle down, it will lead to economic expansion, create jobs, and eventually welfare will come to all the lower sections as well. So the writer blames Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and other leaders and thinkers for propagating this theory. It became widely accepted that government is not the solution. Government itself is the problem when it comes to social welfare. It was widely believed in the Western world, especially in UK, US, under Thatcher and Reagan, that government shouldn't be providing healthcare. Government shouldn't be providing education. Government shouldn't be looking after insurance or social security. This is all the task of private sector. Now, this has led to a situation where the private industry today dominates these critical industries, critical sectors that have a huge bearing on social welfare. And problem is, any private enterprise is always driven by the profit motive. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but that is the essence of privatization, right? They're bothered about their accounts. They're bothered about keeping the enterprise profitable. But when profit motive kicks in, welfare goes for a toss. Social welfare goes for a toss because you can't expect private companies and corporates to be concerned about social welfare. It is the government, it's the duty of the elected government to be bothered about social welfare. Now, this model has been compromised according to Arun Maria, as subsidies in general have been given a bad image, whereas incentives for the rich and investors has been encouraged. All right? He says free market capitalism and liberal human democracy, they find it very difficult to coexist in any country. If you're openly backing free market capitalism, it could end up compromising liberal human democracy and democratic principles of equality, justice, etc. He says democracies are just namesake democracies. If they are promoting free market capitalism, giving benefits only to investors and the rich, not bothering about social welfare, then how will you fulfill democratic goals like ensuring equality and justice? If wealth is concentrated in the hands of 1% of the population, 99% wealth is in the hands of 1% population, and rest are left with pennies and peanuts, how are you delivering equality and justice? That is the argument that the writer is bringing up. He says that this model of economic growth, the trickle-down model of growth, that gained popularity since 90s has created unhealthy democracies. We have namesake democracies where elections happen, there are elected representatives, they even run few welfare programs, but the problem is, since these governments are just bothered about winning elections, pleasing their voters, they are incentivized by the system to come up with populist schemes, which is only a drain on the resources of the state, which does not provide for true welfare. By coming up with very expensive populist schemes, they are simply undermining democracy, not providing for true equality and justice, not providing for social upliftment, while giving numerous benefits to the industry, to the rich, handing over all resources into their hands, believing that trickle-down theory will work some years down the line. This has become a preferred model for political parties in countries across the world to win elections, to please the voters. They say that they are focused on welfare. They come out with very expansive, ambitious schemes, but it's just a drain on the wealth of the state because they're not truly focused on uplifting the people. They're not truly focused on investing in education, healthcare, and other key services. Right? They're giving out freebies because they're incentivized over here. They're leaving social welfare at large to the private industry, giving tax holidays and benefits to the industry, hoping that actual welfare will happen later. Because as long as they're winning elections, they won't be bothered about true, genuine social welfare. He says that economics needs an urgent reform. He says that the economic model of the world requires an urgent intervention. We need to promote the concept of universal social and ecological well-being, which means there should be universal access to education, universal access to healthcare, and that requires the government to play a role. Private sector can never do that. Of course, they will be concerned about their profit margins, right? They can't provide free education, free healthcare to all. The government can. That is why the writer is calling for a rethink of the economic model. He says, yes, industries are needed. He's not completely against industries, but what kind of policies, fiscal policies, is the government going to follow? Just by giving benefits to the industry, you can't expect welfare to happen. Just by coming out with populist schemes to win elections, you can't expect social upliftment to happen. So the writer's point here is we need to universalize free access to essential services, at least like education, healthcare, and social security. The private sector can never do this. It's only the state, the government that can do this. That is true good governance, according to the writer. He is calling upon Indian economists, political parties, and leaders to think about this, to rethink the very paradigm of the economic model that we are following. And he says that we should pay attention to the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at the society as a pyramid, and if the rich are sitting over here, you have the middle classes over here and the lower classes over here. He says that the government policy makers, thinkers, leaders, they should focus on the bottom 50% of the pyramid. Any government initiative should benefit them, the middle and lower classes, not the rich. Yes, promote the industry, create the favorable policies for them, but don't give unnecessary tax holidays and rebates and discounts to them while punishing the middle and lower classes. Because populist schemes will not get them anywhere. Freebies will not bring social welfare and upliftment. So that is exactly what the writer is pointing out. All right. So this essentially is a one-sided criticism of trickle-down theory. All right. The writer says trickle-down theory does not work in reality. According to trickle-down economics, if tax breaks and benefits are given to large corporations and industries and the wealthy, everyone will eventually benefit. It's like this. The government will first give incentives to the rich. It will give tax holidays, tax breaks, and it will promote the rich, wealthy, and the industries. And they expect the private sector to play a role, and the benefits will eventually trickle down the funnel, reaching the middle and lower sections of the society as well. All right, it sounds good on paper, but according to critics, in reality, this model will never work. Trickle-down effect doesn't really carry through, and you will see that eventually social growth and economic growth will never really happen. The rich and the corporates, the industry, they tend to corner all the benefits to themselves. Whatever benefits are given, tax benefits and rebates, they're meant to benefit the rich themselves. The rich keep getting richer, whereas you will see that not enough jobs are being created down the line. Even if enough jobs are created, you don't see big increases in salaries of the middle class workers. Workers will continue to slog around. You don't see any increase in production as well. And eventually the common man stands to lose out, especially consumers and lower class citizens. They tend to lose out in such a model of development. He says if government is giving away all the wealth to the rich and not promoting social welfare, then the revenue of the state will also go down. State's revenue goes down because large tax cuts and holidays are being given. So if revenue goes down, eventually there will be no growth as well, and social welfare will be compromised. Because from where will the government invest in social welfare programs, right? Whatever remaining revenue is there, it is being wasted on populist schemes and freebies, and genuine development and growth will never happen at the social level. So that is the essence of this argument that the writer is making. But I'm saying it's a one-sided argument. There is a counter argument to this as well. All right. So this covers the second article. Next, moving on to the third article from page number 10. It refers to the recusal of judges. Recently, there was a case where a judge of the Supreme Court recused himself from hearing that case. It means the judge takes a call that I shouldn't be sitting in judgment of this case as there is a direct conflict of interest involved. All right. So this is what you mean by recusal of judges. So let's understand more about this in a detailed manner so that you can answer any prelims or mains question. So what exactly is the recusal of judges? Recusal essentially means that whenever a potential conflict of interest arises in a particular case, if the judge appears to have a vested interest or a bias, or if the judge himself feels and perceives that there is a conflict of interest, then the judge can voluntarily withdraw from the case. That is one option, where the judge looks at the merits of the case and he feels that there might be a vested interest. He might be tied to either of the parties, or he might have a connection with the litigants or with the cause. So depending on that, if the judge feels that he can't be neutral, he can't be unbiased, right, then the judge can recuse themselves on their own. This is called automatic recusal. There are two kinds of recusals. One is automatic recusal, where the judge himself withdraws from the case by citing a conflict of interest. Just for example, let's say a family member of the judge is an investor in a particular company, one of the major investors. They are majority stakeholders. But there is a case which has come up against this company. Now the judge, even though he is honest and a honest person, a person of integrity, he is someone whose track record is impeccable, he is unbiased, even then, if the litigant has a doubt, even a small iota of doubt exists in the minds of the litigant, that this judge is connected to that company, his family is connected to the company, even that perception is enough to create a doubt, right? This casts a shadow on the judiciary itself, on the integrity and independence of the judiciary. See, there is a very important judicial maxim. It says that justice should not just be done, it should be seen to be done. For the public, the common man should feel that the judiciary is independent and unbiased. Even if the judges are of great integrity and they are honest and unbiased, despite that, it should be seen that they are unbiased. It should be seen that they have no conflict of interest. That is extremely important. The optics of a case is also very important. Even if the judge feels that, okay, I can be unbiased in this case, even though I have a conflict of interest, right? The public should feel that. The litigant, the party in the case should feel that. So that is where the maxim becomes important. Justice should not just be done. Justice should be seen to be done. All right? So based on this, if there is that perception of doubt, if there is an element of bias involved, if there is a conflict of interest, the judge can recuse themselves. The other option is the litigant can raise an issue. The party involved might say that I don't have faith here because the judge has a conflict of interest. There is a chance that the judge might be biased deliberately or maybe even as a coincidence. But I don't have faith in the judge, so please recuse yourself. This plea can be made by the party, by the litigant. However, it is not binding on the judge. The judge themselves have to decide this. It is left to the discretion of each individual judge, right? They have to apply their own conscience. They have to ask themselves and check whether they can be unbiased. And it's not just about they being unbiased. It's about the parties and the public feeling that confidence in the judiciary. right? So depending on that, the judge can decide, the judge has the discretion here to recuse themselves from a case where there could be an element of conflict of interest. So why do they recuse themselves? It's because of two important judicial maxims and principles. One is nemo judex in suo causa. That is, no person shall be a judge in his own case. You can't sit on your own case and judge yourself, right? Not everyone is a Ranjan Gogoi or a Arnab Goswami to judge themselves. So the general judicial maxim is that no person shall be a judge in their own case. Which means if there is an element of conflict of interest, you have to recuse yourself, move out of this case and let someone else handle this case. The other important maxim here is that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. This was laid out in 1924 in the Rex versus Sussex Justices case in England. Is that clear? This is widely accepted as part of the legal framework around the world. We also have the third schedule of the Indian Constitution, under which the judges have sworn an oath. They have taken the oath of office, promising that they'll perform their duties without fear, without favor, without affection or ill will. Meaning they'll maintain their integrity, their independence. They'll not be biased. This is a constitutional commitment they have made under the oath that has been administered to them under the third schedule. There is also the restatement of the values of judicial life, which is basically a code of conduct adopted by the Supreme Court, which forbids a judge from deciding a case involving any entity where they might have a pecuniary interest unless the concerned parties clarify that they have no objections. In that example I gave you, right? If a judge has some kind of pecuniary interest in a case involving the parties, then under the code of conduct, the judges are forbidden from taking up these cases. They have to recuse themselves. Unless and until the party says, I'm fine with it. Both the litigants agree that I have no issue with this, only then it can proceed. All right? But in general, recusal is a matter of discretion left to each judge. They have to look at the conflict of interest involved, the concern raised by the parties as well. Finally, the decision is left to the judge whether to recuse or not. There have been instances where, despite the request coming from the party, judges have not recused themselves. They have sat in judgment of these cases where they had a conflict of interest. They have continued because there are no set rules here. There is no set legal mandate in the context of India. So the decision to recuse is not just about the conscience and discretion of the judge, but it's also about asking whether the parties and the public have faith in the judge. Right? Ideally, that is what should happen, but no one can force the judge to recuse themselves. Parties can't insist that this judge has to be replaced. They can't do that. They can only point out that there is a conflict of interest, so the judge, the lordship has to consider recusal. But if the judge decides to continue, no party can compel a judge to withdraw. All right? There are no codified rules in this regard. There is no law or exact policy in this case in India. It is just a practice that the Supreme Court has instituted based on these codes that exist, these judicial maxims and principles that exist. In contrast, in other countries, you actually have legal policies for this. In the US, there is a well-defined law on recusals. Specific instances are specified in this American law where the judge has to recuse themselves. All right, the judge they'll be forced out of the case in certain cases where there's a conflict of interest. In the UK as well, a policy has evolved, a framework has evolved based on judicial announcements and judgments. Based on a series of judicial pronouncements, a policy has come up in the UK judiciary, which is followed in the case of recusal of judges. But in India, we have neither. We don't have a set of precedent as well, which has turned itself into a policy or law of sorts. We don't have a law enacted with the parliament as well. So the Supreme Court, based on these judicial principles and maxims, has brought out this practice as a convention of sorts, where the judge will individually decide whether they have to recuse themselves or not. All right? So that is what you should understand from this important topic. Now we come to the last part of today's discussion, that is Prelims Bytes. We have 5 important articles, small articles. Let's go through them quickly, one by one. We have an article on page number 1 that refers to IRDA or IRDAI, the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. This topic, this regulatory agency is very important for your prelims. So we will talk about IRDAI, But before that, let's see what is the topic here in news. The IRDA has proposed an all-in-one insurance policy plan. See, right now we all have separate insurance plans, separate health insurance, separate life insurance, separate property insurance, a separate insurance for accidents, right? Separate motor vehicles insurance. So this is very difficult to maintain. It's tough to invest in different policies as well, right? This is one of the hurdles in promoting insurance penetration, in increasing insurance coverage in the country. In India, I hope you know, insurance penetration is very, very low. It is very limited. The coverage of insurance is very limited across sectors. So IRDA is coming out with a new model, a new solution, something like the UPI model. Just like UPI revolutionized digital payments in the country, something on those lines is being promoted here, where a single policy will be brought out, just one policy. Insurance companies might start offering this insurance policy. It's an all-in-one policy, which will give you all the coverage required. Health cover, accident cover, life coverage, right? Then property coverage. Everything under one single simple policy where the terms are straightforward and it is promoted by the industry with a proper communication as well, where there will be an application communicating the features of the policy, prioritizing women for this insurance program, linking all the death registry data into a common single database, so that following the death of an individual, insurance can be processed in hours and days instead of taking a much longer time, right? So all these changes have been proposed by IRDA as part of this single insurance policy. Just one insurance policy covering all these segments with a digital database and infrastructure to enable the services with focus on women, even offering bundled services together with insurance policy, like for example providing yoga and fitness programs as a part of the insurance package, where private companies can come out with different models. If you buy this policy, you get 1 year's gym membership free, something like that, right? So that is being promoted by IRDA, and it will also be linked with the death registry, the digital registry that is there. So that the moment a death occurs, immediately the data is available. You don't have to wait for the death certificate issued by the local authorities. You don't have to wait for the long bureaucratic process. Right now it takes many days, sometimes weeks and months to process insurance in case of death. This can be brought down to just few hours if the digital death registry is integrated with the insurance database, right? So that is what IRDA is promoting here. So let's take a look at this important regulatory body. It is a regulatory body for the insurance and reinsurance sector, and it's a statutory body. Please make a note of this point. It is a regulator of the insurance and reinsurance industry. It's a statutory body set up through the IRDA Act, which was passed in 1999, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority Act. It was recommended by the Malhotra Committee. Another important fact for your prelims. Based on recommendations of Malhotra Committee, the IRDA Act was enacted, providing for the establishment of this regulatory body. It consists of a chairman, 5 full-time members and 4 part-time members, all of whom are appointed by the Government of India. The Government of India makes the appointments of these 10 members, 1 chairman, 5 full-time members, 4 part-time members. And it is headquartered in Telangana, Hyderabad. Previously it was Delhi. It had an ad hoc presence in Mumbai as well, but now it's headquartered in Hyderabad in Telangana. Next, another important article from page number 1. It has been reported that China has been constructing so-called model villages or moderately prosperous villages all along the line of actual control that is facing India. As you know, the LAC is a disputed border between India and China, and this disputed border is divided into 3 sections. We have the western sector of the border that covers the Ladakh region. Then you have the middle sector of the border covering Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And then you have the eastern sector of the border covering Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. Alright, so these are the 3 sectors in the India-China border which is disputed as China refuses to accept the boundary lines. So as China has gotten more aggressive against India, it has not only carried out more and more incursions and captured parts of Indian claimed territory, thus changing the status quo itself. It has even tried building these so-called model villages or moderately prosperous villages, which is referred to as the Xiokang villages in Mandarin. That's the Mandarin term, the Chinese term. These are referred to as the Xiokang villages. All right. This is a deliberate Chinese attempt to populate the border areas. As you know, this Himalayan border bordering Tibet and India, this is very sparsely populated because of the tough weather and terrain conditions. But to strengthen its border claims and to push India back, put India on the back foot, it is trying to populate these areas by bringing population from other parts of China. And it has been noted, there are several satellite images and surveillance footage which is available with Indian intelligence agencies to show that in the last couple of years especially, China has accelerated the development of these so-called model villages, the Xiokang villages, all across the LAC, especially in the middle and in the eastern sector. In Uttarakhand, across the Uttarakhand border especially, there has been increasing Chinese patrols near these new villages that have been built. And more so in the eastern sector, towards Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, even towards Bhutan's border, where China has a dispute. Here you can see the Chumbi Valley of Tibet that lies between Sikkim and Bhutan. It extends towards the Nathula Pass here and the Doklam Plateau of Bhutan, and it's right across the Siliguri corridor of India, the chicken neck of India, the strategic choke point of India. So in the Chumbi Valley of Tibet, we have seen multiple Xiokang villages coming up in the last few years. The same is being noted towards the Arunachal Pradesh border as well, towards the McMahon line. These villages are being given basic infrastructure. It has been noted through satellite intelligence and even drone surveillance that in each village, a good 300-400 houses are being built with basic infrastructure like roads, electricity, etc. And military outposts are coming up. Since the area is getting populated now, in the name of security, military checkposts are being set up and the Chinese patrols have gone up around these so-called model villages. So essentially, this is a military strategy of China. That is what India believes. India believes that by creating this infrastructure and by populating the border areas with these villages, it is trying to gain a strategic edge. It is trying to change the status quo, and they act as so-called border defense villages of China. Right? If there is ever a conflict as well with India, they will act as a line of defense, backing the Chinese forces and weakening India's claims, and in such a conflict, in a hypothetical conflict, it could push back India as well. This also explains why India has launched the Vibrant Villages program. Right? We just yesterday discussed the Vibrant Villages program. It is nothing but a direct counter of India to the Xiokang Villages program of China. Yesterday I told you that in the border states, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, then Sikkim and Arunachal, and also in Ladakh, the Vibrant Villages program has been launched where India is scaling up infrastructure, border infrastructure, promoting connectivity and local economy, right, to ensure that the people here are in favor of India and provide for better growth and development, to retain the population in the border areas, to prevent their migration to other parts of India. Right? So this program of India, the Vibrant Villages program, is basically and essentially a counter of the Xiokang Villages program of China. All right? So that is what you need to understand from this important article. Next, we have a couple of articles on page 8 and 15 related to the Battle of Bakhmut. The Battle of Bakhmut between Russia and Ukraine. In the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, there has been one notorious and unfortunate battle called the Battle of Bakhmut, which has been raging from more than 1 year. It's been more than 1 year that this intense conflict broke out in Bakhmut, which is in eastern Ukraine, located over here. All right, it's an industrial town which was heavily populated as well, and it is quite critical in this eastern part of Ukraine. So here, Ukrainian and Russian forces, they have been waging a brutal battle since more than 1 year. And according to several reports, at least a good 20 to 30,000 lives have been lost in this battle. Both sides combined, Ukraine, Russia together, they've lost a good 30,000 soldiers and civilians. It has been said by Western agencies that Russia alone has lost more than 20,000 soldiers in the Battle of Bakhmut. This is one of the most important battles that has been fought in the larger Russia-Ukraine war. Recently, Russia has claimed to have won this battle, and Russia has claimed to have captured Bakhmut in the eastern province of Ukraine. I hope you know that in the Donbas region, this is the entire eastern parts of Ukraine where the conflict is very intense. This is the Donbas region where you have Donetsk and Luhansk provinces. This is where Russia had sponsored a separatist war in 2014, backing the pro-Russian elements to break this region away from Ukraine. So after the war began last year, Russian forces have fought against Ukraine and they have sided with the separatist groups as well, and they have liberated Donetsk and Luhansk. Russia even went ahead and conducted a so-called referendum last year where the people of Donetsk and Luhansk have apparently voted in favor of Russia, and now Russia claims Donbas region to be a part of Russian territory. This entire stretch, even stretching across Mariupol to southern Ukraine as well, this whole part is being claimed by Ukraine, but no country recognizes this. This is a breach of international law. It's a violation of UN Charter because Russia has violated the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, right? Without a right provocation, Russia has been the aggressor here. So no one recognizes that Donetsk and Luhansk are part of Russia. But Russia has brought this under its control and it has claimed to have integrated these areas by conducting a referendum. So in this area where Russia is already dominant, the final battle was for Bakhmut, right? It was an intense conflict where Ukraine was resisting the Russian attack. Russia brought thousands of mercenaries as well. The Wagner group, the notorious private militia led by Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's very close to Putin. He runs this private mercenary outfit called the Wagner group. It brought in at least a good 20,000 soldiers. Most of them were prisoners and retired soldiers, etc., who were brought out from Russia, right? They were promised a lot of incentives. They would be released as well, apparently, after the conflict for their services. They would be released from jail, right? So all the criminals, prisoners, and many retired personnel, they were recruited by the mercenary group and incentivized to fight this battle. After suffering intense losses and losing thousands of people on both the sides, finally Russia has claimed to have won Bakhmut. The whole city has been flattened. The industrial infrastructure, city infrastructure has been destroyed. Thousands of lives have been lost, and Russia has claimed to have captured Bakhmut. And this could be a turning point in the war, right? But the concern being expressed by the editorial is that neither of the sides are stepping back. It appears that they are willing to scale up and escalate the war, and they are ready to pay the higher cost of the war as well. All right. So from a prelims and mains point of view, Bakhmut is an important location. You should know where exactly it's located, and you should know that an intense battle was fought here, which cemented Russia's control and capture of the eastern parts of Ukraine. All right. Next, on page 14, we have an article related to environment and ecology. Just few months back, Project Cheetah was launched by Prime Minister Modi as an ambitious initiative. The government has put its entire might behind this initiative to bring back cheetah population in the country, as cheetahs have gone extinct since many decades. We signed deals with Namibia and South Africa, planning to bring, translocate or relocate cheetahs from Africa to India. As you know, they have been introduced in the Kuno National Park of Madhya Pradesh. Many of the cheetahs were getting slowly acclimatized as well. But in the last 2 months, there has been unfortunate and disastrous news coming in. Several cheetahs have started losing their lives. Many of these cheetahs were brought in. They have not been adjusting to the unique harsh conditions of the Kuno National Park. 3 adult cheetahs were found dead in the last couple of months. Now 3 cubs also have lost their lives. In total, around 6 cheetahs have already been lost. This has raised very serious concerns, and experts are pointing out the unavailability of food, lack of nourishment, and the harsh temperatures and lack of water to be the primary reason. Right? They're ruling out any foul play or any other toxins, etc. The primary reason being attributed here is that they are not able to adjust. The harsh weather here, the temperatures are hitting 45 plus. There is a water scarcity as well, even though it's a controlled environment where they have been left in, right? There are challenges coming up for the survival of the cheetah population. They are finding it difficult to find enough food as well and stay nourished, which is further increasing and aggravating their injuries and diseases. So experts are concerned about the survival of the cheetah population. So that is why the government has intervened. It has set up a new committee to lead Project Cheetah. It's called the Cheetah Project Steering Committee, and it will be headed by Rajesh Gopal. Please make a note of this. Rajesh Gopal Committee will lead Project Cheetah. It will be a 11-member committee to steer Project Cheetah, and Rajesh Gopal is someone who has considerable experience in conservation projects. He was a key member of Project Tiger. He was working very closely with Project Tiger, and he was also the Secretary General of the Global Tiger Forum, which is a very important global institution. All right. So Rajesh Gopal has been appointed as the chairman of this committee to lead Project Cheetah and steer Project Cheetah towards success. Their mandate is to look at the factors responsible for these deaths, prevent them going forward, and come out with a better plan to ensure the success of this relocation project. All right. Now take up a small homework, a small exercise. Read about Global Tiger Forum. It's very, very important. It's a very important global institution. Read about it, identify 3 important points and post them in the comments so you can help other students as well. Let's see how many of you can do this. Coming to the last article from International Relations and Cybersecurity. Microsoft and the US government have alleged that Chinese-backed hackers have attacked critical communication infrastructure of the United States, that too of the US military. So the US military has a very important base on the island of Guam that you see here in the Pacific region. In the Pacific region near the Pacific Island countries, that is near Australia and Indonesia, the US has a territory here called Guam. It's an American sovereign territory where there is a major US naval and air force base. The military communication infrastructure at this military base has reportedly been hacked by a group of Chinese hackers who are backed by Chinese intelligence. And this group is being called as Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon is a stealth cyber hacking group reportedly backed by Chinese intelligence agencies, and it is launching major attacks against Western critical communication infrastructure. Clearly the attempt here is to conduct espionage, to spy, to collect classified information from US military bases and target other Western countries as well. Even other Western countries, Australia, New Zealand, etc., they have issued similar advisories recently. China has criticized this, it has countered these allegations. It has said this is just a disinformation campaign to target China. China has rejected that there is such a campaign going on, but according to Microsoft, according to the US government, there was a series of cyber attacks against the Guam military base, reportedly by Chinese hackers known as Volt Typhoon, with an attempt to penetrate the communication infrastructure and to spy on Western military systems. Is that clear? So just be aware of this, because cyber warfare between Western countries and China has been escalating constantly. China has launched similar cyber campaigns targeting India as well in the past. So naturally the topic becomes very, very important for our exams. So this brings my discussion to an end. I've given the mains practice questions. It's based on the first 2 topics we have covered today. I hope you take the question seriously, you attempt the question and write your answers and post them in the answer writing portal, for which link is given in the description box below. So this completes my discussion for today. I hope it was a fruitful session. It was a good session. Do let me know how it went in the comments. And if you liked it, just support us by pressing the like button. Share more and more comments so that we can read, we can get to know that you are liking these initiatives or not. And of course, do subscribe to the channel. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.